going? It's Ultimus, and today I want to get back to revisiting some of the talent trees. Looking at the initial talent tree as well as the PvP talent trees, and of course some of the new spells that we have, or at least the spell listings that we have for each class and spec. So today I'm going to be looking at Frost Death Knights. Frost Death Knights are in a strong place right now in WoD as far as PvP goes. They are definitely damage machines that is undeniable to anybody who plays them and plays against them. One could argue that the class plays itself. They are probably in one of the strongest positions they've been in a very long time. And so it's interesting going into now Legion to see what they're going to look like and what changes are going to be made. So I want to start here with the initial talent tree, you know, everything you get from level 56 to 100. We have yet to see what the 110 talents look like, if we're getting any. That's the one thing that I was just realizing the other day. I thought about this. I was just assuming we're going to be getting new spells and new talents, or another tier of talents when we get to level 110. However, nothing has really been said about it, and I think I'm just assuming or presupposing because that's what we've always gotten. Now, I don't have a reason to think that we wouldn't, because again, we always have. But with all of the new things coming out with the PvP talent trees as well as the trees in the artifact weapon, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? And I do apologize. My dog is demanding my attention at the moment, so my arm is down here petting her while I'm trying to talk to you guys. So hopefully this isn't awkward or weird. So all that to say, let's go ahead and jump right in and just take a look at what we have right off the bat for Frost Death Knights. So Frost Death Knights, we are going to be a dual wield only spec. That is right. Two-handed Frost is going to no longer be a thing as of Legion. And of course that is non-optional, of course, because we are getting artifact weapons and that's all we're getting. Unholy and Blood are going to remain the two-handed specs for Death Knights. So if two-handed weapon is that big of a deal to you, you might end up playing Blood or Unholy. And I'm okay with that because Unholy is my preferred spec anyways, but Frost definitely has me intrigued because I like the talent choices, especially in the PvP talents and the artifact weapons. So just keep that in mind going into Frost Death Knights. Rhyme, your Obliterate has a 45% chance to cause your next Howling Blast to consume no runes, generate no runic power, and deal 300% additional damage. So pretty much the same. Frost Fever grants the Death Knight 50 runic power. I'm not sure what that's all about. That's very, very interesting because I know Death Knights are getting very specific with their diseases. For example, Frost is now going to exclusively have Frost Fever, and that's it. Unholy is going to have its own unique disease, and Blood is also going to have its own unique disease as well. So again, what all that is going to look like come game time, we'll have to yet see that. But I think it'll be interesting to see each Death Knight spec only managing one disease rather than a couple. Frost Strike, of course, we still have that. Chill your weapons with icy power and quickly strike the enemy with both weapons, dealing a total of... Thor, that is not helpful. Oh no, I should have done this. Is a terrible idea. 192% plus 192% frost damage. So it's going to do equal parts for your offhand and main hand weapon. Howling Blast costs 1 rune or 10 runic power. I'm not sure what the cost on that is going to be because I have a hard time still differentiating between the rune and the frost thing and what all of that is going to be up there at the top. But it blasts the target with Frigid Wind, dealing 38.52% of attack power as frost damage. And Northrend Winds, applying Frost Fever to the target, to that foe, and 38.52% of attack power frost damage to all other enemies within 10 yards, infecting all targets with Frost Fever. Let's make sure that's not a talent here. Yeah, so I'm curious what the Northrend Winds bit is there. I think that might be an artifact talent, if I remember correctly, so I'll have to wait and see. But it does affect everything with Frost Fever, which is your disease. It's going to deal frost damage every 3 seconds for 30 seconds, and has a chance to grant the Death Knight 5 runic power, so every tick of damage. So there's that. Obliterate costs 2 runes. Also keep in mind, remember that Death Knights are going to be losing the specific runes. What we're going to be having now is just runes. Everything is just a rune. There's going to be the resource cost of runes and runic power. No more having to worry about juggling and managing, death runes, blood runes, frost runes, all that kind of stuff. It's just runes, runic power, baseline. Very simple, not so convoluted and kind of confusing to understand. DKs themselves aren't hard to play. It's the mastering of the resource system that gets a little tricky for Death Knights, and I think any good Death Knight will tell you that that's the hardest thing to master. Looking at Remorseless Winter now, drain the warmth of life from all nearby enemies for 8 seconds, dealing 30% of attack power, frost damage each second. So Remorseless Winter is back in the sense of it's functioning very similar to how I always get this one confused between what's in the game now and what was in the game during Cataclysm and Mop, I believe it was. Because I know Death Knights had the one ability that would do the AoE damage as well, but now what we have in the game is the stun, but that's a talent. So now Frost Death Knights are getting this baseline. So that's very, very interesting to me. I think, notice there's no stun attached to it. It's just an AoE every 20 seconds. So, or you, on a 20, yeah, every 20 seconds you have this off cooldown. So again, it's interesting that 30% of attack power is a decent amount of damage too, so that could be very, very interesting. It doesn't say anything about applying any kind of disease, so we'll have to wait and see, though I can't imagine it would, unless you can glyph it or spec into it. Actually, glyphs are getting a pretty minor role in Legion 2, so we'll have to wait and see. Chains of Ice shackles the target with frozen chains, reducing movement speed by 60% for 8 seconds. Makes sense. Killing Machine, your auto attacks have a chance to make your next obliterate automatically critical strike. Makes sense. And so pretty much the same thing that's in game now. Icebound Fortitude, 3-minute cooldown. The Death Knight freezes his blood to become immune to stun effects and reduce all damage taken by 20% for 8 seconds. Pillar of Frost. The power of Frost increases the Death Knight's strength by 20% and grants immunity to external movement effects such as knockbacks. Mastery increases all Frost damage done by 16%, and I imagine that would obviously scale. Empower Rune Weapon, 3-minute cooldown. Repower your Rune Weapon, immediately activate all your runes and generate 25 runic power. So that's all the abilities we have at the moment. We'll have to wait and see. I'm curious. Okay, and these are the ones that are every spec for Death Knights is going to have these ones. Your parry, your Death Gate, Death Grip. Makes sense. Blood exclusively has the taunt attached to it. Rune Forging will still have. Death Strike for Frost is going to attack with both weapons, dealing 135% physical damage with your main hand weapon and 135% physical damage with your offhand. And it heals you for 50% of all damage taken in the last 6 seconds, minimum 7% of maximum health. So it's going to do a minimum of 7% healing. But it says it heals you for 50% of all damage taken in the last 6 seconds. So is that the last 6 seconds before you launched or hit with Death Strike, or is that going to be 6 seconds after Death Strike? The way I'm reading it, I would imagine it's going to be 50% of all damage taken in the 6 seconds prior to Death Strike landing. That's the way I'm reading that. Now with Blood, it's going to have an increased healing effect or potency if you're below 35%, which makes sense because Blood is all about that vampiric type thing. Just the mechanic alone on Death Strike is very interesting. It's not a flat, you do damage, you get healing. It's going to be completely dependent on how much damage it looks like you took previously. So a good timed Death Strike after a solid burst might be pretty effective. On a Pale Horse, you are as hard to stop as death itself, increasing your mounted speed by 20%. Mind Freeze, still the interrupt on a 15-second cooldown. It can interrupt and lock people out of their school for 4 seconds. Their school of magic, I can say, not like their actual school, because that'd be really awkward. You got hit with Mind Freeze, now you can't go to school. Would suck if you're going to university and paying for school. Path of Frost activates a freezing aura for 10 minutes that creates ice beneath your feet, allowing raid or party members within 50 yards to walk on water or usable while mounted. Makes sense. Anti-magic shell, 45-second cooldown, surrounds the Death Knight in an anti-magic shell for 5 seconds, absorbing 100% of all magical damage and preventing application of harmful magical effects. Damage absorbed generates runic power. So, every 45 seconds you're going to get this spell that shields you for 5 seconds, absorbs 100% of all the magical damage, and prevents any application of those harmful magical effects. So you can eat polys, fears, all that kind of stuff like that. 5 seconds is a decent chunk of time too. Like in PvP, 5 seconds can be like forever. Like games can end in 5 seconds. So that's always the funny thing. Like when you read some of this stuff on paper, you're like 5 seconds, that's it. But then you get into an actual match or an actual PvP situation, you're like 5 seconds lasted forever. So kind of cool. And of course with the runic power generation as well. So it's kind of nice. Control undead. Dominates the target undead creature, forcing it to do your bidding. While controlled, the undead minion's haste is increased or reduced by 30%. Be increased, that'd be awkward. Lasts up to 5 minutes. That's always fun to do in ICC. And of course, raise ally. 10-minute cooldown. Pours dark energy into the dead target, reuniting the spirit and the body to allow the target to re-enter battle with 60% health and 20% mana. So still getting that battle res life. Pretty cool. Now moving on to talents. Let's see if we can move through this relatively quickly. Because while I want this video to be informative, I don't want it to be a half an hour long either. So here we go. Shattering Strikes. Increases the frost critical strike damage by 30%. Makes sense. Icy Talons. Oh, interesting. That's... Okay, I was going to say, wait a second. Wasn't this a baseline ability for a while there? I don't know. Icy Talons Frost Strike hits increase your melee attack speed by 25% for 3 seconds. Refreshing this effect extends its duration. Then Freezing Frogs. Frozen Frogs, babies. Frozen Frogs. Frost Fever damage now has a 10% chance to trigger Rime. And of course, Rime is your ability that your Obliterate has a 45% chance to cause your next Howling Blast to consume that rune. So, pretty cool there. Not gonna lie, looking at this, I feel like Freezing Fog or Shattering Strikes would be my choice here. I don't know. They're all pretty good, actually. I'm not going to lie. Just for someone who kind of casually plays the Death Knight, I don't look at either of these and think, wow, these are terrible. I would probably still go with Freezing Fog or Shattering Strikes, but I could see Icy Talons being good as well. Murderous Efficiency. Consuming the Killing Machine effect has a 25% to energize a rune. That's good. Runic Attenuation. Increases the chance to trigger Runic Empowerment as if you had spent 20% more Runic power. Interesting. Horn of Winter. The Death Knight blows the Horn of Winter, gaining 1 rune and generating 15 runic power. Interesting. So this is going back to no longer being a strength buff, but it's actually going to be a resource generator. Because that's how Horn of Winter used to function. I mean, it was the attack power buff for a bit, but it also generated runic power, because back in the day, Battle Shout used to do the same thing. It used to generate rage along with give your party the buff. That's interesting, because I know they're trying to move away from all classes having buffs and only certain classes having buffs so they can be the support roles. So that's interesting. Like, and all of these are completely affecting you only. It's not like you're going to get like a party buff from any of these necessarily, so I could see how all of these would compete with one another. That's interesting. Ice Cap. Your critical strikes during Pillar of Frost have a chance to extend its duration by 1 second. Oh. Empower your rune weapons with Hungering Rune Weapon, gaining 1 rune and 10 runic power every 1 second for 9 seconds. And this replaces Empower Rune Weapon. Okay, so I would completely replace this one. Both have a 3-minute cooldown. Interesting. I don't know if that's better than Empower Rune Weapon. I don't know. Avalanche. While Pillar of Frost is active, jagged icicles fall onto your nearby enemies, dealing 20% of attack power damage every 5 seconds. That's kind of cool. Just for the effect alone, what that looks like, that might be actually really fun. Stuff like this I can see being super good for soloing old content too, just because it's just more AoE damage, which means bigger pulls, which means faster runs. But I kind of like Ice Cap. I'm not gonna lie. Just looking at it, Ice Cap or Avalanche, I think would be my 2 options of choice, because I just don't see Hungering Rune Weapon being actually better than Empower Rune Weapon. But maybe it is, though, for the long-term game. I don't know. For, like, quick games like Burst and, like, 2s and things like that, I could see this being okay. But maybe in 3s, Hungering Rune Weapon might actually be a better choice. Abomination's Might. Your Obliterate critical strikes have a chance to drive enemies to their knees, stunning them for 2 seconds. Holy crap. So with Abomination's Might now, your Obliterate's going to have a chance for a stun attached to it. I want to know what the internal cooldown on that is, of course, and what the actual chance is. That's crazy. Because, I mean, if you're getting gnarly, like, Obliterate crits, and especially if you're going for, like, an Obliterate crit build, more or less, where your entire build of talents is focusing on Obliterate crits, I wonder if you can chain stuns off yourself. I can't see that being a thing, but we'll see. Blinding Sleet. Targets in a cone in front of the Death Knight are blinded, causing them to wander disoriented for 4 seconds. Flash Freeze. Enemies struck 5 times by Remorseless Winter are... Okay, there it is. So I was figuring that. So Remorseless Winter, still again, this is going to have the damage, but if you take Flash Freeze, anything hit by it by 5 times is going to be stunned for 3 seconds. I almost like the Disorient, I'm not going to lie. I think a lot of this is going to depend on... Okay, let's see. Remorseless Winter, 20-second cooldown. That's pretty good, actually, with Flash Freeze. 1 minute on this. The Disorient isn't bad, though. And the fact that it's a cone, so basically is Dragon's Breath for Death Knights. But depending on what the internal cooldown is on Abomination's Might, and how quickly and how often you can get your Obliterate procs up and stuff like that, especially if you can set it up for guaranteed crits, Abomination's Might looks really appealing to me, I'm not going to lie. Pathetic Magic. Your anti-magic shell is 50% more effective, and when it expires, 100% of all damage is absorbed. Is dealt as arcane damage, maybe divided amongst nearby enemies. Oh, wow. Implaceable. Icebound Fortitude reduces damage taken by an additional 10%. Additionally, every 10 runic power you spend reduces the cooldown of Icebound Fortitude by 3 seconds. Interesting. Permafrost. When you deal damage with Frost Strike, gain an absorb shield equal to 50% of the damage dealt. Wow. I almost like Pathetic Magic, but this is actually really good too. Get an additional, so that's a 30% total damage reduction, plus all the runic power you spend during that, you're going to reduce the cooldown of it anyways. Icebound Fortitude already has a 3-minute cooldown, so that might actually be decent because you're going to... I mean, 3 minutes cooldown is a decently long cooldown on a defensive cooldown, so... But gaining that Absorb Shield, especially if you take Shattering Strikes, like, this is where I like stuff like this, because we're starting to see talents, more or less, that look like they're going to build off each other, so taking Shattering Strikes plus Permafrost might actually work really well together. And even, like... If you take Empower Rune Weapon, gaining 1 rune and 110 rune power every 1 second for 9 seconds, that could be effective with that as well, because you're going to be able to Frost Strike more. Interesting. Kind of cool. Frost Scythe, a sweeping attack that strikes all enemies in front of you for 250% frost damage. Wow. Just 6-second cooldown. That's kind of crazy. So that on top of Obliterate, what's Obliterate going to do? 258, 258. That's almost as strong as Obliterate. Wow. Because Obliterate already hits like a truck, so I can't imagine having 2 abilities that hit that hard, but alright, especially as an AoE. That's crazy. Frozen Pulse. Your auto attacks have a chance to cause you to radiate intense cold, inflicting frost, 30% of attack power, damage on all nearby enemies. Gathering Storm. Remorseless Winter deals 15% more damage with each successive wave. That's kind of cool. So the more your Remorseless Winter hits, the more damage it does. Interesting. Dig it. And then looking at the last tier here with Obliteration. For the next 6 seconds, Obliterate costs 1 less rune. Oh. 1.5 minute cooldown. I mean, what does it cost already? 2, right? 2 runes? That alone could be gnarly. Breathless Indragosa. Continuously deals 100% of attack power Shadow Frost damage every 1 second to enemies in a cone in front of you within 12 yards. Deals reduced damage to secondary targets. You will continue breath until cancelled or runic power is exhausted. So, same exact way it functions now. And then Glacial Advance. Summons glacial spikes from the ground that advance forward, each dealing 100% of attack power, frost damage to enemies near their eruption point. 12-second cooldown. That's not long at all, too. With 1 rune. I think this is probably going to look really, really cool. How effective it's going to be, I don't know. Especially since we're seeing a lot of these like abilities that you're shooting something and then it's going to shoot out in front of you or do like a cone type thing. This is another thing I was saying before. It's like I feel like we're going to see a lot of these, and we are seeing a lot of these. So I feel like it's almost tired out already, but I want to see what they look like in game because the idea is really cool. Especially because it's like stuff like this has a skill cap attached to it. to where obviously there's an area of accuracy. It's like, you know, warriors with shockwave. You know, I can't tell you how many times it's really embarrassing when you just miss your shockwave and then you got to wait however long, 40 seconds for it to come back up again. It's just really awkward. Whereas Stormbolt, a little bit more effective because it's, you know, single target, unfortunately, but you're pretty much guaranteed a stun unless, you know, there's dodge or parrying going on. But Obliteration sounds really cool. Every 1.5 minutes for 6 seconds, Obliterate is going to cost 1 less rune. Just the Obliterate spam is going to be insane. Just going to be insane. So yeah, craziness. All right, let's take a look at the PvP talents. So with our PvP talents, what we're looking at now is pretty much the same 3 up here at the top. Gladiator's Medallion, which is your trinket, 2-minute cooldown. Works exactly the same as your PvP trinket. So again, no more PvP trinkets. In PvP, in fact, trinkets as a whole are going way of the water buffalo. So that's a thing. Adaptation, all full loss of control effects with a duration of 5 seconds or longer will be removed shortly after being applied. It has a 1.5 minute cooldown. Duration of incoming crowd control effects reduced by 25%. Relentless sounds good, and Gladiator's Medallion. I'm not too sold on adaptation, but we'll have to wait and see what it actually looks like. But yeah, Relentless and Gladiator's Medallion I like in general. 25% reduction, like flatline to all CC, is kind of crazy. Train of Thought, damage increased by 15%. After or being attacked will cancel this effect for 8 seconds. I don't understand, or I don't think that will be super good for a melee class, because typically you're up there in the melee and in the, you know, right in range anyways. So I don't see that being very good. Now for hunters or casters, that could be very good because you tend to be out of the way a little bit longer. So we'll have to wait and see. Mind Quickness increases haste by 15%. That I can see being super good for a Frost Death Knight. And then Initiation, critical chance increased 30% on targets at or above 80% health. See, these two I could see being very devastating for a Frost Death Knight. Just because with Frost Death Knight, if you get your proc stun, if you're going to get some gnarly chunk damage right off the bat, I can almost see me taking this for my warrior as well, especially trying to line up those gnarly, like, Mortal Strike hits, just big old chunks, and all of a sudden, like, half their, you know, torso is missing because we hit them so hard. And at or 80% health, like, you sit, that's kind of where you sit a lot of times during PvP anyways, because I find that very rarely do you get capped off. I mean, it happens, but a lot of times because of what's going on in 3s and 2s, you don't get capped off entirely anyways, so 80% is a generous number. But Mind Quickness, and probably be even better for Unholy Death Knights, but for Frost as well, because more attacks means quicker procs, which means more obliterates, which means bigger damage. So there's that. I really wish Mind Quickness would be effective for warriors too, and it might be for arms. We'll have to see what haste looks like for arms warriors, because again, we've yet to see what the artifact talents look like at all. Cadaverous Pallor, if that's how that's said. If it's not, I do apologize. Damage taken from magical critical strikes are converted into a disease on yourself, dealing nature damage over time. So wait. Okay, so any magical critical strike effects on you, it cancels out the initial crit, but it applies a debuff to you, like a disease on yourself, so it's going to deal that damage over time. That could be interesting and a good way to mitigate, like, huge single target burst. But that would be, I feel like this would be terrible against any kind of dot cleave. Like, obviously you wouldn't take this talent on a dot cleave because you're already taking so much damage from dots anyways. You don't want more pressure on yourself. But this might be an interesting way to shut down arms warriors as a Death Knight. That's interesting. Unless I'm thinking too small too. Let me know what you guys think as far as how that would be. Actually, that wouldn't even matter, because warrior wouldn't matter because it's all magical. So what? Frost, fire mages, arcane mages, Destrolocks. You really wouldn't want to take it against a Shadow Priest or a Affliction Warlock, I wouldn't think. I don't know. Dark Simulacrum functions the same way, I would imagine, and it is exclusively a PvP talent. Now, you will no longer see this in PvE, and is not a baseline ability for Death Knights. And then Anti-Magic Zone places an Anti-Magic Zone for 5 seconds that reduces spell damage taken by party or raid members by 60%. 2-minute cooldown. So it doesn't replace Anti-Magic Shield, which is nice. It just allows you to drop an AoE effect that so you're able to put that there and then help your teammates, which again is kind of a nice way depending on what kind of comp you're playing. I always liked Anti-Magic Zone, and I was just kind of sad to see it go. So let's see. Necrotic Aura. All enemies within 10 yards take 5% additional magic damage. Oh, wow. It doesn't say just from you either. So if you're playing like a Shadow Cleave with like an Affliction Warlock and a Death Knight or something like that, that could be pretty intense. Heartstop Aura. Increases the cooldown of all abilities by 30% to all enemies within 10 yards. See, that just sounds insane. I know that's like for Unholy Death Knights as well, but that's crazy. Decomposing Aura. All enemies within 8 yards slowly decay, losing... typo, I see what you did there. I almost read that as ISOing, but I realized that was a typo. Losing 2% of their max health every 2 seconds. Stacks up to 10 times. See, initially my thought would be, I want that for my Unholy Death Knight, and then I would take Heartstop Aura on my Frost Death Knight. But all of these are actually good, and so I really think this will depend on what you're playing with in RBGs or arenas. Solo play, if I like for duels or just running into battlegrounds just for kicks and giggles, I could see this being really good. These are actually really good auras. Like, I don't think any of these are actually terrible. That's going to be a tough choice. Death Chill. Chains of Ice now freezes the target, rooting them in place for 4 seconds, but now has a 5-second cooldown, which is fine. The immobilization will be nice, allowing you to peel a little bit better as a Frost Death Knight. Northrend Winds. Okay, so there's the ability of the talent we were talking about earlier. The damage done by your Howling Blast is increased by 200%, but it no longer deals area of effect damage. So, if you don't want AoE, no problem. Just throw Northrend Winds on and get an additional 200% on your Howling Blast, which is crazy because... I mean, Howling Blast is already dealing an insane amount of damage anyways. 38.52% of attack power, which again is not necessarily a small number. Frost Fever, and then Northrend Wind, so crazy. And then looking at Tundra Stalker, damage of your Frost Strike is increased by 25% on snared targets, and critical strike chance increased by 50% on rooted targets. Now that's a bummer. I mean, you can't take Death Chill and Tundra Stalker. That's a tough choice. And again, doesn't say anything about... So suddenly Death Knights and Boomies are looking really good together. Death Knights and like Frost Death Knights and Frost Mages. TSG just got really strong too. Because no warrior is going to, like, especially if you're sitting on a target, no warrior is going to let Hamstring fall off. Frost Strike on snared targets by 25%. On rooted targets. Crazy. Frozen Center. The radius of your Remorseless Winter is reduced by 50%, but its damage is increased by 100%. Holy butts. Killing Machine. Oh, this is interesting. So this is now a talent so you can take to replace the passive Killing Machine, which states your next Obliterate has a 100% increased critical strike chance with an additional 50% critical strike damage. So with a 45-second cooldown on this one, you can force that effect on your Killing Machine on your Obliterate, which is kind of crazy. So guaranteed crit with 50% additional critical strike damage. So that'll be interesting. Again, stuff like this I like. I don't know how popular it's going to be, but I like this talent because of this reason. This gives Frost Death Knights a little bit more control over their burst rather than having to sit around and wait on their Killing Machine procs. Because from a lot of the research and reading and just watching streamers and YouTubers and people like that who really do play Frost Death Knights, I feel like the one thing they constantly say is they feel like they're wasting procs in Killing Machine because stuff procs too much. And there a lot of your like your stat priority is because it's not always that you want to use Obliterate necessarily because Frost Strike might be better. I don't know all the details of it because again my Death Knight is just an alt, so I don't put that much effort into learning a whole lot about it, which maybe I should. Because part of me feels like I could probably be a better Death Knight than a Warrior, but I just love my Warrior too much. But like stuff like this is cool because this is your on-demand burst, or this is control over when you burst, and you're not waiting for your Killing Machine procs. So I like this a lot. Again, how good it's going to be, that's yet to be seen, but I like that the option is there. And a 45-second cooldown isn't too bad either. Chill Streak deals 600% of spell power, frost damage and reduces their movement speed by 70% for 4 seconds. Chill streak bounces up to 5 times between closest targets. Sounds cool. Like, I'm curious to see what spell power is going to look like for a Frost Death Knight, but I mean, none of these are terrible talents. Right. Like, none of these are bad at all. I like that a lot. So, to wrap it up, I like the direction they're taking Frost Death Knights in. It actually makes me consider ditching Unholy, more or less, because I know you're able to spec all 3 specs and focus on your artifact weapons, but they did say that your off-spec artifact weapons are going to grow slower because you're obviously not focusing on them. But this makes me wonder if I should be playing Frost during Legion or Unholy. That's yet to be seen. I don't know. We'll have to find out. So definitely going to be paying close attention to Death Knights and wanting to give them a good test when the beta comes out. If we get in, fingers crossed. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Look forward to Enhancement Shaman coming up next. I definitely want to be covering Enhancement Shaman. And I'm going to be, of course, keeping an eye on Death Knights, or not Death Knights, I'm sorry, Warriors as well. I'm still waiting for the artifact weapon tree to drop. I literally check the website about 4 times every day because I'm like, I don't want to miss it. I got to get it. I got to get it. I got to get it. So that being said, we'll for sure be doing Enhancement Shamans next. And I might be looking at some of the other classes I'm interested in just to mix it up so we're not just talking about only artifact weapons, so we can get some variety on the channel. But if you play a Death Knight, specifically a Frost Death Knight, let me know in the comment section below if the new talents in PvP and for your standard trees excite you. Would you do anything differently? What do you predict being some of the better talents? Do you see any cool talent combinations that maybe would stack well with each other that I missed? Let me know in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you guys. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. Shooting for that 500 subs by summer, so help me get there. That'd be awesome. And as always, I'll catch you next time.